Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everyone? Geoff, Mosher, Adam Caplan. We finally got some signings to talk about. So we will talk about both an in-house signing, sort of, and then another unrestricted signing by the Eagles. And we'll give you the intel on that. As we told you, the Eagles were going to wait for those value signings, and they have. And we'll definitely get into some of the signings because they both come with a little bit of controversy, or at least polarization from the people out there, Adam. So, well, let's just talk about where you are and where I am. I'm home, where it's still cold, and you look like you're in a nice warm venue. Owners meetings about to start this week, and as always, you're on hand for Inside the Bird. So tell me what it's like out there in Florida.
Yeah, so in a couple hours, we've got the coaches' breakfast. They split into 2 days. Today is Monday, so we've got, I think, the NFC one day, the AFC the other day. And what was interesting, they used to be an hour. I'm guessing the coaches complained that they had to sit with reporters for an hour, so it's now only a half an hour. Mm-hmm. So food's great, but see, the only disappointment there is I like hopping from table to table to talk to coaches and listen in, and it's going to be harder because sometimes I would do like 10 coaches over an hour. Now I'm going to have to do it's only half an hour, so I'm only going to be able to do a couple. So we've got that going on. And then, the big thing is interesting because the Eagles are involved in this. They submitted that rule change with the Colts. They are the ones that want both teams to get the possession in overtime. So what's interesting is that was them and the Colts, by the way. The Titans are the team, and I like this one better, where to end the game, the team that gets a possession first to end it, you have to not only score, but you have to get the 2-point conversion. So we'll see if either passes. And Rich McKay, the chairman of the competition committee, in our talk with him on Friday, made it pretty clear. It's hard to get stuff changed. You could get momentum, and he claimed there was momentum, but as he clearly pointed out, you still need 24 votes to change. You need a majority of the NFL owners doing it. So at least 24 have to change it. So we'll see what happens. That'll get done by Tuesday. And I think what's happened here is because so many the NFL's they know that fans were up in arms, not seeing great quarterback play, and then getting cheated out of it when Brady was with the Patriots and Mahomes didn't get the ball because the Patriots scored first. So and that was in 2018. We'll see what happens here, but at least there's some momentum. We'll see if it passes.
So is it 3 separate overtime proposals? There's the Eagles one where both teams get at least one possession, and then after that it just becomes the same way. Whoever then scores next wins. Correct?
It's actually, I'll get it right now.
Tied. I thought the Eagles version was both teams get at least one possession. The first team scores a touchdown, then the second team has to score a touchdown as well. First team kicks a field goal. Then the second team can either match with a field goal or win with a touchdown on the second possession there. And then if it's still tied after, then it just goes back to the original. Whoever scores next then is the winner. That's how I thought the Eagles proposal is. Like you said, the Titans, I sort of like their concept where you score a touchdown and go for 2. That's it. You end it and the game's over. But I don't know that necessarily I don't know if that makes it any fairer, to be honest, because if you look at that Kansas City Buffalo game that did go into overtime. Yeah, I just feel like a high scoring seesaw game like that where nobody can be stopped. The 2-point conversion, I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference, especially if the team gets it right. So I don't know. To me, if you get the touchdown, get the 2-point conversion, and walk off, people are still going to say, but the other team that scored 37 points instead of 38, they should have a chance to get the ball too because they were moving.
Sure. That's the argument. Yeah. So here's the language with the Titans. Both teams an opportunity to possess the ball in overtime unless the team with the first possession scores a touchdown and 2-point conversion, which I was saying before.
Right.
The Colts and Eagles allows both teams to have an opportunity to possess the ball in overtime.
Right.
Which I've seen every argument because the old schoolers want, hey, listen, if if one team wins the toss and they score, hey, so be it. You got to stop them. It's your job to stop them. I get that. I get that argument. I like the Tennessee one, man. I like that because I don't know what the percentage is on 2-point conversion, but hey, listen, if you score and get a 2-point conversion, that's pretty good. 8 points, it's pretty good. You should, I kind of like that one.
So I'm wondering, you might be more knowledgeable about this than me. The fact that only 3 teams of the 32 even submitted a proposal makes me think that it's not going to change. And I personally don't think it needs to change. I know it's not 100% fair. I actually don't also care that it's not 100% fair. I think it's great drama and it's good to talk about. And even if there's a team or a fan base that gets upset about it, it's still part of the game. So again, I don't think it's fair, but the fact that only 3 teams and not a lot more try to recommend proposal changes, does that indicate to you that you think these 2 will get shot down?
No, it actually, you sound like you're going to get 20 teams turning these in. It's
Okay,
based on what Rich McKay
right.
said. Yeah, it doesn't. I was never really clear on that, but based on what Rich McKay was saying and based on what some other people were saying, no, it's really what happens is you have to kind of sell it. And they'll have, I'm sure, a statistical analysis that they'll hand out and fairness and not fair and so forth. So, and then, of course, the other one, which we talked about weeks ago, and this one is done by Howie Roseman and the Eagles, about not losing not letting people who are not interviewing for a GM job interview until after the draft. And I get it. I've heard both sides of this one. Yeah, the Eagles, as you know, lost 2 guys, 2 of Roseman's top guys, to the Bears and to the Giants, Brandon Brown and Ian Cunningham. So that obviously was something that the Eagles didn't like. They would have, I know he's friendly with these guys, but it does hurt them. Because the big one is they're getting their Eagles information. They know what the Eagles are thinking because they were there for the initial setting of the board, so they kind of know how the Eagles are seeing it. Plus, they also have their free agency board.
So now, would this apply to all executives? By the way,
no, only. Yeah, well, here's the way it is, though. Actually, you can't stop anyone from interviewing for a GM job, but what you can do. And by the way, it was by Baltimore, Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Tampa Bay. So the language is this. The teams must grant permission for another club to interview and hire a non-high-level executive position or non-secondary football executive position. The language was adjusted a couple years ago to allow people to interview. Like you could interview for an assistant GM job before the draft. Now they want to be able to block that. They want you to have to wait till June 30th because these people have access to the information.
Yeah, so this only applies to AGMs then? Because what I'm wondering is if I'm a team that fires my head coach and fires my GM after the last game of the year, right? And I need to start finding a new GM who's going to build a new scouting staff. If you're telling me I can't hire a single person until after the draft,
you can hire GM,
unless they're free agents. Unless they're free agents, then that's very difficult.
Right. Like, well, no, you can interview. Obviously, you can interview GM candidate, but you can't hire. You cannot interview what these 1, 2, 3, 4 these 4 teams: Baltimore, Buffalo, Philly, and Tampa Bay. Is they don't want that new GM to be able to bring in a assistant GM until June 30th.
So it only applies to the hiring of an assistant GM.
Yeah, they're calling it secondary positions. It doesn't say assistant GM, but we know what that means. It means player personnel director or assistant GM. It's basically the same job. I
still think you need, you're going to need those people. Even if you hire a new GM, you clean house, you got a new GM. Now that GM has to bring in people. You make that person wait. It's not fair. So that might be fairer to the organizations, right? But is that fair that you may be hanging on to people that you're not going to use for an extra month or 2 and then mass fire them after the draft and then
I know
bring in a whole new
that's a great point. Yeah, because that's been. I remember one guy who worked for the Browns, who they blocked from interviewing until after the draft. Actually, until his contract expired. Let's say it expired 2 weeks after the draft. Well, the problem was every job was filled, and the guy wound up getting a job, but it wasn't the job that he was looking for. He had to take a different job.
Right.
So they're only talking. It has nothing to do with scouts, though. This only has to do with high level personnel people.
Sure.
Blocking the language. And by the way, you wouldn't. Typically, what happens is when a GM comes in, it's rare that he fires the entire staff in January. They've already done all this work. He decides who he wants to keep after the draft anyway. But this one, the language is interesting. They're not doing this until by May 10th. It's June 30th. Is the language that's proposed here. So it's in regard to secondary football executive positions. We know what those are: player personnel director and assistant GM interviews. They want to block them from doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with that, because I have a feeling that some teams are going to feel strongly the way the Eagles and Bucks, I think you said, and Bills and Ravens do, and I think some teams are going to feel strongly the other way. That it may not be the greatest system, but it's better than what's being proposed, because there's going to be upside and downside to each to one way or the other. So we'll see on how that gets voted on. See if there's anything else of note for the. Yeah, I always feel bad for some of the coaches. Not all. I always felt bad at the owners' meetings for the Eagles head coach, no matter who it was, and for Andy Reid. And I'll tell you why. I felt bad for Eagles head coaches because my experiences there were with that was there for one for Doug, definitely Chip. I think the last one of Andy. And these guys don't get to. I mean, the Philadelphia media is so big. Same thing with sort of New York media too. Like, these guys don't get to eat. They literally.
I know, it's so funny because
a plate of food and it sits in front of them, and they never get to put the food in their mouth.
I know, because they're. You know why? Because what's happening is they're being filmed. Like the Eagles website, I believe, films the entire thing, and I saw them. They were on my plane. Those guys. So. It is funny. Yeah, it is true. Because what I do is I go up, I get there 15 minutes before to actually eat. I actually try to eat before, once they let us in, I just try to eat before it starts. And then the other thing is, you're trying to get a good spot.
Yes.
Right. And I always try to get next to the head coach. Peter King and I remember Peter King and I used to fight for elbow room to try to get the right spot. So, and it's always good to see the new head coaches there. And by the way, with Chip Kelly, I'll never forget this because he's so mercurial. You never know what he's going to say. So I said, Chip, and it might have been in 2013. I don't remember, but it was one of those. And then, of course, he had the 2015 one when he had personnel control. But I do remember one of them asking him, was it always his goal to be an NFL head coach? He said, no, it was never his goal.
Right.
And I was taken aback. I'm like, why would you feel that way? He goes, never really was. I wanted to coach in college. But the problem was I didn't get the follow up. They asked him, well, then why did you take an NFL job? I didn't. No one really found that, because Chip is so matter of fact. Mm-hmm. No one found that odd. I sure as hell did, but I didn't get a chance to follow up because you can't there. There are too many guys wanting to ask questions.
Yeah, no, my one of my favorite experiences there was with Chip, and as you mentioned, I think the breakfast usually starts at 8 or 8:15. So to get to Chip, I think we were there at 7 just to make sure we got a seat at the table. And this was the year where I had reported on, the strong possibility of Deshaun Jackson getting cut, even though he had made the Pro Bowl. And we were there. And I think Zach Berman got the first question. And he asked Deshaun, like you said, you have to be very specific, sort of. Not that Zach wasn't. Zach asked him, how he felt about Deshaun Jackson. And his answer was, Deshaun's a good player. He brings a lot of speed, dimension. It was a very kind of coach speak type question. And I remember I immediately followed up, will Deshaun Jackson be on your team this upcoming season? Which is about as direct as I could think to ask. And his quote was what really made everybody hit to their laptops after. He said, well, we're just going to do what's best for the team. He had a chance to say, yes, Deshaun Jackson's going to be on my team. Why are you and he didn't. He gave the most vague answer you could ever give to a very specific question. We're going to do what's best for the team. And that's when we all knew right there. I mean, I had a pretty strong indication anyway. I'd reported it. But that was basically when everybody who didn't believe it started to believe it that Deshaun Jackson was going to get cut. And under
So-
the sidelines, Evan Matthews was going through a thing with him and Evan Mathis, I should say, was also going through with Chip at the time as well.
So
but yeah, you're right. You got to get there early.
So what's interesting about that is, and the language that these coaches and executives use. So Rick Spielman,
Mm-hmm.
Rick had the famous line which he used for Percy Harvin. It's our intent to not trade Percy.
Right.
And the funny thing is, that's what Pete Carroll used at the combine. Oh, it's our intent to keep Russell Wilson.
We have every intention, yes, of keeping Russell Wilson, right?
Right. We have but you didn't say you wouldn't trade him. That gives you the window to trade the player. And that's why language is very interesting when these coaches and executives speak.
No doubt about it. All right, we got a big week coming up on Inside the Birds. We're going to have Greg Cosell on with I guess it would be now part 6 or 7 of the Intel with Greg Cosell. We did NFL wide receiver prospects for the draft last week, and that got huge numbers. People were really into wide receiver prospects, and I thought Greg was fascinating on a lot of guys, all from the top guys, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, to even some sleepers like Tyquan Thornton that he mentioned, and Velus Jones. So good stuff there. Make sure you check that out if you haven't yet. And Greg is kind of keeping us in suspense for this week. We have not yet pinned him down on what position group we are going to be preview as of right this second. When people are listening to this, most likely Monday morning, we don't know yet what we're going to talk with Greg. I'm hoping it's defense, but he said he's been going through so many different positions that he's not sure which one he feels like getting into yet. So it's a nice surprise, but make sure you check it out. Were you about to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I don't think anyone in the NFL, and he technically works in the NFL because he works for NFL Films, I don't know that anyone watches more tape than he does, because most teams, like, they'll whittle it down to like a top 100 players they would draft, or 150.
Right.
I mean, he may see you 300 players. I mean, it's really crazy. It's really incredible, and he's seeing more now than he's ever seen because of what we're doing and I guess the NFL Films has I think he's got a pod with Matt Bowen.
I saw that, something about tape heads or something like that. I think it's called.
I'm not sure what they're calling it. And then obviously he has the matchup show for ESPN. They do a draft show. Right. So yeah, it's great. And we've got him, and people love him, so it's cool.
Absolutely. Andrew DeCecco, big shout out to him. Went up to Penn State for us this past week, or last week, and did a nice report on their pro day with some quotes from the guys. So make sure you're checking out InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew will continue doing his draft coverage on InsideTheBirds.com. So please subscribe. It's free. Just get your RSS feed to get your Inside the Birds content straight to your reader. I wrote a column about the Derek Barnett signing that we'll discuss in a minute, because I feel like people are a little bit not seeing the forest of the trees on that signing. So we will discuss it and get into everything else free agency related. So we'll probably start with Derek Barnett in a second, but of course, we wanted to tell you again about our new partner, Devicor. Over the last year, we've seen what is now known as the Great Resignation. It's been clear that there's no better time to change careers than the present. Devicor is a Philly area, family-owned career development company that helps guide hardworking professionals on the path to new and fulfilling careers. Unlike those big companies in the career development space that offer the same cookie-cutter career advice and services, Devicor's certified career development team is hands-on, passionate, knowledgeable, and takes pride working closely with their clients to ensure that their experience is personalized and tailored to their needs. So whether you're in need of a new resume, cover letter, CV, or you just want to optimize your LinkedIn profile, or even work with a career coach, Devicor has you covered in all spaces. Go to devicor.com/birds to schedule a free 15-minute career coaching consultation, and you get an exclusive 15% discount on your next order. That's devicor.com/birds. People, take that up. Free, emphasis on free 15-minute career coaching consultation, along with an exclusive 15% discount on your next order. Make sure you take that advantage of that. It's a very important time for that. It's an important time for the NFL. There's unemployment and employment going on, Adam, with free agency. The Eagles bring back Derek Barnett on a 2-year deal. And I think a big part of this was the fact that when the news got reported, the numbers did not get reported. It wasn't like 2 years, 20 million, 20 with this much guaranteed. When that happens, as we tell the people all the time, if they don't want the number out there, that's usually because it's not a great contract for the player, but it is for the team. So we have to, I would imagine this is a more of a 1-year structure type contract. Would you agree?
Yeah. By the way, I was given numbers, but they're not verified, so we're going to wait till Thursday. I know someone asked me on Twitter. I'm going to hold off because I'm not putting anything that's incorrect. I'll get slammed if it's not correct.
Definitely.
So I don't. We put out correct numbers. We've got a history of getting the stuff correct, so we're not going to do that. But I agree with you. I'd be shocked. Let's explain what structure means. So 1-year structure means on a 2-year deal that a team could get out after 1 year and own no money. There might be, knowing the way the Eagles do contracts, would be some dead money because there would be signing bonus proration. Mm-hmm. But that means that they would not owe any cash after year 1, which is important to know. They typically do these things on guys that they don't know what their future is going to be with the team. That's the way all teams do it.
Right.
And so I'm mildly surprised that they brought him back. We'll get into as we talk about Barnett here, but it's not like it'll change anything. It doesn't change the need. The need's going to be the same. They need high end pass rushers. So they bought Reddick in, and they're not done. We'll get into that in a second, but. Barnett has not been the pass rusher they thought he'd be. I know he's had some injuries.
Definitely.
A couple years ago about his weight, but he needs to improve. And the thought is that getting a short-term deal, you would think he's highly motivated to be the player he should have been.
Yes, I would agree with that. He has been a very inconsistent player. I didn't think you and I talked about him probably not being back. And I think I remember saying that it's going to happen. Because he's a pass rusher who's had some success and not a lot, but he's had, years of 5.5, 6.5 sacks, got some tackles for a loss, quarterback hits, that he would probably wind up getting overpaid in free agency. So the fact that he's back, to me, signals he didn't get overpaid. So let's take an example. I think Charles Harris re-signed recently with the Lions. We thought he might be an Eagles target because he can play that strong side linebacker position. He's a pass rusher. He got what I think was like a 2-year, $14 million type deal, 7 guaranteed, I think, were the numbers on that. So, and that was announced. I mean, that was sort of leaked with the numbers. So if Barnett didn't even get that or got something close to that, that's a pay cut from the $10 million I think he made last year on the 5th-year option.
Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about maybe 5 to 7 years, 5 to 7 million, perhaps, or maybe up to that. We'll have to see. When the numbers come out, the numbers will come out. But the bottom line is,
here's the Harris numbers. Yeah, here's the Harris numbers. So 1-year structure on a 2-year deal. It is at signing $7 million fully guaranteed, and he gets that cash in year 1. There's no guaranteed money in year 2. There's just it's typical of these short-term deals. If you want to, his base goes from 1.035 million, which is a veteran minimum, to $6 million the second year, which tells you want to be back in year 2. You got to play well, or you'll cash that $7 million. You can put it in your bank account. You won't be getting any more from the Lions if you don't do well. So,
right.
I would be shocked if it's any better than the Barnett's deal when I get this stuff confirmed. I wonder. I'd be shocked if it's any better. I honestly, my guess was 2 years and $10 million, $5 million a year. The numbers were given were a little bit richer than that, but the guarantee number didn't make any sense, and I was like, this can't be right. So I'm going to hold off on discussing that part of it. But and you're right. There's also upside to Charles Harris's deal. He's got 2.25 million in incentives, so to bump the money up. But this is these short-term deals, man. If you don't play well, you're not coming back for year 2. That's kind of the way the teams are looking at this.
Right. Now, I understand. This is what I wrote in my column on InsideTheBirds.com. Hope everybody checks it out. I understand that when you look at it in totality with the rest of the Eagles offseason, it reeks of a run-it-back approach that nobody wants to see, a run-it-back approach from a team that won 9 games and really didn't beat anybody good. I totally get it. And I also understand that not only is it a run-it-back feel, but you're bringing back a player who was largely an underperformer for most of his career. And not only that, add on top of that he's a reckless player. He has hurt the team in some really important moments with bad penalties. I get all that. But I think you also have to understand defensive end. We talked about this in our going into free agency preview, that the Eagles were likely to sign a veteran defensive end because they had they have Brandon Graham coming off an Achilles, right? They had Josh Sweat and Teron Jackson. That's it. Those were the only 3 defensive ends other than the guys who were signed a futures deal like Malvo and Matt Leo and things like that, or an exemption deal. So just 3 guys under contract. One of them, Teron Jackson, is a 6th-round pick. He's not guaranteed to make the team. So really, and the other guy, Brandon Graham's coming off an Achilles. You need bodies at defensive end. I was saying Arden Key, who's still out there, I thought would be a good guy for them to sign. So you can knock them for not maybe bringing in a different guy to just to get a different, a less reckless player, or someone who maybe have a little more upside than what you've seen, or someone who, the old Dudable Herrera approach where you're bringing back, or Hector Neris, you're bringing back the same guys every year and you know what you're going to get, which is disappointment. But they were going to sign a 1-year veteran anyway. So signing Derek Barnett, who at least has been on the team, he has been productive at times. Again, inconsistent, but he's not terrible. I think people act like he's terrible. He's not terrible. Okay, he's actually a pretty decent run defender. When he wants to play, he's a pretty decent player. He's not great. He's just okay. But they were going to sign a defensive end anyway. They need bodies. And the big thing about this that people really need to understand is that they're not done at defensive end. It's very, very likely they're going to draft some young kid, at least 1, maybe 2. And when they do that, with Brandon Graham coming back, with Josh Sweat, we'll see what they do. To me, Derek Barnett doesn't have to play 60, 65% of the snaps unless they get a boatload of injuries or the guys that they want to play are disappointments. And if that's the case, then they got bigger issues than just bringing back Derek Barnett.
Sure. Yeah. And you said it very well. So yeah, barring something unforeseen, like if their board gets obliterated in the first round, again, assuming they keep a minimum of the 2 first-round picks, we'll get into receiver a little bit later because I had a thought on that, which is a little different from what we talked about before. But obviously, defensive end is something they have to do. Derek Barnett is based on the contract structure. Eagles typically don't get fully guaranteed money in year 2 for a guy that does not get the job done. So, I would expect that. I agree. At least 1 in the draft. And they have to do that. And they need a rotation because right now you've got Josh Sweat, Barnett under contract, Brandon Graham, we don't know how good he's going to be, coming back from the Achilles. And Cameron Malvo was a nice little story, but we don't know about him yet. He hasn't proven anything.
Right.
Teron Jackson also hasn't proven anything as a 6th-round pick. So, they obviously are not done, and they have to do more.
Right. And please, the argument that this is the same pass rush by bringing these guys back from the team that finished second to last in sacks, you have to remember Hassan Reddick is a pass rusher. So he's not, even though he's not a defensive end, they have still upgraded their pass rush. It's not really run it back because you brought Reddick. Brandon Graham was gone from week 2 until the end of the year last year. You really never had Brandon Graham last year. So even if he's not the same Brandon Graham, he's still Brandon Graham. I mean, until I see him fall flat on his face and not able to play this game, I'm going to assume he's going to play at a fairly decent level. So you've added Hassan Reddick, who's kind of entering his prime, coming into his own, giving you about 11 to 12 sacks. You're bringing back Brandon Graham, who's going to give you some pass rush and versatility, by the way, can move inside if need be. And then you're probably going to draft 1 or 2 guys in the top 60 who rush the passer. That's just what the Eagles do. So this is not a run it back approach. This is not the same old with Derek Barnett. I get why it feels that way. I get why it looks that way. And I'm not defending everything because I personally would have tried to get whether it's an Arden Key or somebody else out there. I understand you can bring him back. Derek makes it look like you're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. Yeah, you bring him back, put him in a different spot. Now he's back up. I totally get it. But I think let's not overreact to it because you needed bodies at that position.
No, what I was saying is about running it back. It was not just Barnett. It was Greg Ward and Boston Scott.
It seems that way. It does.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's just kind of funny. But none of these moves are changing the draft, what they're going to do in the draft, folks. Trust me on that. They know who Derek Barnett is. He's a guy that has upside. He's had some good moments. He's not good enough. He needs to be better. And they need to fortify that defensive end position. Now, and as you said, with Reddick, he's a pass rusher. Now, we don't know because they're not practicing yet. We'll see how much he plays with his hand down. Is he just going to stand up the whole time? Is he going to play with his hand down in nickel? We don't. Well, it's simply what you do with pass rushers. Is you go to your 43 front nickel, but we'll have to see what Gannon does.
Well, when they have brought in guys who stand up, like Chris Long, okay, who actually started his career as a hand in the dirt guy, but when he came to the Eagles, he was a stand up pass rusher, and they used him that way. If you remember, they would, and even with Barnett, they did as well. The extra edge defender, they would have him stand up and rush from a stand up position, and it worked well that way. So I would hope that Jonathan Gannon does the same and does not make Hassan Reddick put his hand in the dirt, because I don't think he's comfortable with that or does that.
Yeah.
But you make a good point, because he should have done that also with Ryan Kerrigan last year, and he didn't. Ryan Kerrigan kind of became a backup, because of Graham's injury, became that first and second down defensive end who played with a hand in the dirt straight up like a 5-tech, and that's not really what he's been.
Well, he did some stand up, he did some on the ball stuff, but what we saw in training camp was really exciting with Kerrigan. And then maybe it's because of Graham getting hurt, I don't know, but he was not used the way that he had been used in the past, particularly with Washington when he tormented the Eagles as a stand up pass rusher.
Right.
Oh my God, did he torment the Eagles? Wow.
So let's, before we move on, I want to just talk about the pass rush, not defensive end, because now pass rushing involves Sam linebacker. If you look what the Eagles have, they have Hassan Reddick, they have Josh Sweat, they have Hargrave, they have Cox. All right. They have Brandon Graham. They now have Derek Barnett back. That's 6 guys right there. Right. 6 guys who are all capable pass rushers, with the idea that they probably add 1 or 2 more early in the draft. You never know if those guys are going to be able to play or not, but you hope that they can. It's good depth. They did not have this depth last year.
But they need an upgrade, and that's why they got Reddick.
Absolutely.
As I learned very, very well from Bill Polian, it's not about how many guys you have in a position, it's how many guys or upgrades are better than the guys you used to have.
Sure.
Because the worst thing you can do is you have, we've got 5 of these guys, we don't need another one. Well, if the guy that's on the board is better than anyone you have, why would you not draft him? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that's how you miss in the draft when you think you have enough players. No, it has nothing to do with it. The Eagles got to have 50 linemen, defensive linemen. If they don't have guys who are high-edge pass rushers, they don't have good enough pass rush. That's what we learned last season. Their pass rush was atrocious, quite frankly.
Yeah. But remember, coverage was a big part of that too. It's not like they had terrible pass rushers. They just had a bad marriage with their back end to their front end. And the Eagles have never really, even when they're most successful, it's not like they've had that Joey Bosa, TJ Watt, like when they won the Super Bowl, or even some of the other years they made the playoffs, it was more about having a 4-man line where all 4 guys were really good pass rushers. They would have Cox and Bennett and Graham and Long, and the Super Bowl year, again, they went deep. They would rotate guys, and none of those guys had probably like 13, 15, 17. None of those guys were ever league leader in sacks. But as you just mentioned, what somebody told you, they had 4 guys who are all capable of getting you that 8 to 11, and that gave them the power. They were always like the sum of the parts more than the individual itself.
Well, the one thing though, that wide nod front puts up numbers. I will say that. Say that. It's the truth. We're still trying to figure out Gannon's system. We know there are going to be tweaks. We're just trying to figure out what that's going to look like conceptually. Because as you mentioned, Graham got hurt. That certainly hurt them. Boy, we remember saying at the time we probably don't quite understand how much it's going to miss. They're going to miss him, and boy, did they miss him! My God, they were 31st in sack percentage last year.
Yeah.
And they were number 1 D line in the year before. So it's look, they need more pass rushers, and it's fascinating what they could potentially do in the draft. As we have these shows with Cosell, I'm very curious to think with Greg what Greg translates the defensive lineman into potentially in the Eagles scheme. I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Right. Yeah, I hate that Brandon got hurt. Never like to see that, but we did mention last year that going into the year that there was a new scheme going on where players were going to have to adapt to it. And then we also said this was not as deep of a defensive line / pass rush as, say, 2017, 18, and 19. It just wasn't. And unfortunately, Graham's injury proved that. And I don't know if you remember, we got kind of killed by some people on social media saying, how can you say this defensive line isn't as deep as years past? It's great. And this and that and the other. And we just said, trust us, they're making a scheme change and it's just not as deep as it hadn't been in the past. And that unfortunately was proven to be true, but I like the depth going forward now, assuming that they draft one or two guys and that they can play a little bit. So like you said, though, they need a young dynamic guy in there.
And then the other thing is, the thing that you have is you have the change of philosophy is completely different from Schwartz.
Yep.
I mean, you've got again, Kerrigan's not going to be back most likely. I can't imagine he'd be back because it just didn't work. They were using him literally standing right up over whoever he was playing behind. It was weird. Like they first started him in training camp as a stand-up linebacker, like he was with Washington, right over the ball, like just like you would think.
Right.
And then now again, as you said, great effort.
Yep.
And then we didn't hear from him. It was like, I know he broke his hand, but man, it was like he wasn't on the team for 2 months. Like,
that.
What's that?
Yeah, that was it almost felt longer than 2 months, honestly, that he wasn't on the team.
I was like
he was on the team until the end of the year. Yeah.
Is he on the team? Like what?
I know.
Anyway. Oh, well.
All right, let's move on. We'll talk about the linebacker signing. First, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app, and get all of your sign-up bonuses using the promo code ITB. That's promo code ITB to get all of your sign-up bonuses on the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app. All right, let us now get into the other signing, linebacker Kyzir White. I like the signing. I'm not, because I remember this is one of the few placeholder linebacker signings that the guy actually played against the Eagles the past year. So I remember when we did our preview pod for the Eagles-Chargers game, Kyzir was playing a lot because of injury to Kenneth Murray, and they had another, I think, injury at linebacker. So he was playing a lot and playing well. We spoke to somebody, I don't know if it was Greg Cosell maybe on the pregame show, who also said he's a good, fast, athletic linebacker who can cover, and he had a good year. So I know some people are surprised that he was still out there, to be signed now. But I call this a good value signing. Do you have contract terms yet? Are they out yet? Or
I don't. Yeah, we're going to have them both. Here's what happened. Here's why White did not. So I got the answer from a Charger source. So Kyzir White does not really match physically the size that the head coach of the Chargers wants. Brandon Staley, who calls their defense, wants bigger size at linebacker. White is around 218 to 220. He was a safety at West Virginia. He actually went to junior college. Before he went to Lackawanna College. Before that,
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so
whole country.
He's not quite physically built the way that you would want if you had defense like Brandon Staley wants. Brandon Staley wants bigger linebackers. White is built, he's smaller, but he's quick to the football and really smart. And I wonder if Gannon identified him. We don't know yet who. We know that the GM makes the call, but was it through his tape study of guys they wanted to add? Did he find this guy? Did their pro scout? Was their pro department high on him? I don't know, but this is a very productive player. He's just smaller, but he's a tackling machine. He's very fast to the football, and now so let's move this forward here, because the Eagles generally play two linebackers. They're very rarely in base. How do you see this guy deployed, and how do you see the linebackers being used?
So there's one thing I like Kyzir White, but one thing I fear is that it's a little bit repetitious of what they were hoping for with Eric Wilson, who was an undersized linebacker who had a ton of tackles the year before with Minnesota, playing on a pretty good defense with some good guys around him, but also not being asked maybe to always take on the run head on, because Minnesota had been playing this defense for a while. They were familiar with it. We saw Eric Wilson really struggle in tackling. Now, Kyzir White, the metrics say, is a way better tackler, but you don't know, is he tackling head on in the gaps, or is he tackling side to side? Because if you funnel, what the Eagles used to do when they ran the wide nine was scheme their run defense so that the running back was funneled to either outside the right tackle or outside the left tackle. And that's why a guy like Alex Singleton played really well in Schwartz's defense, because he was making sideline to sideline tackles, not head up in the A gaps where a guy his size is going to get trucked by some big running backs, right? Or just struggle to get off bigger offensive linemen. The way we see Jonathan Gannon run his scheme, I don't know that it's going to look all that differently. So I do have some concern about how they plan to use Kyzir White. I would think that on first and second down, or in, as you said, base defense, when they think the opponent's going to run, I would think that you've got Reddick as your on-the-ball linebacker, strong side, and that you have TJ Edwards and Davion Taylor as your linebackers there. When you go to nickel, because you think the team's going to pass, I think that's where you get your combination of Kyzir White and Davion Taylor, assuming Taylor's healthy, or we always have to leave open the possibility that the Eagles use a top 60 pick on a linebacker who can play and will be able to enter their name into the competition for that. If they're planning
I don't
to use
a linebacker,
well,
you mean, or DN?
A linebacker.
They won't. I'd be shocked. I mean, because they just
could take one in the second round.
No, absolutely not. A pure linebacker. Oh God, my hair would be on fire if they did that.
Why?
That would be so not like them.
They've done that in the past. Michael Kendricks was a second round pick.
It's 9 years ago.
Oh, that's a fair point.
I don't see it.
We've talked about how you can't take the same mentality in 10 years.
But they don't think that. I'm not. It's funny. I'm not disagreeing with your point that they should do it. It's a question: will they do it? That's just not the way that they think. Kyzir White, it's their hope if he's the player they think he is, and they like TJ Edwards a lot. And again, they don't play linebackers a lot, so Sean Bradley's a special teamer. It'll be Kyzir White, Edwards, Davion Taylor, and Reddick obviously is a strong side linebacker, but he's more of a pass rusher. And again, Jannard Avery, what we heard is they want him to back up if they re-sign him, Reddick. That's not been eliminated yet. From what we're told, we'll see if they re-sign him. But the longer you wait, the better the contract for the team, obviously. So. But we're told Avery got a couple teams involved there, so we'll see what happens. But I just would be stunned. It would really be a nice sea change if they did that. Even if they spent a third round pick on a linebacker, that's just not the way that they think. I'd be very surprised, but they did with Davion Taylor. And there, by the way, Jim Schwartz was very vocal, the way we understand it, very vocal. He wanted a linebacker the worst way because he didn't get Kenneth Murray, and you got Davion Taylor, who was not, by the way, that was not the grade they had on him. They lower grade on him.
Well, as we asked around the league, so did pretty much everybody in the league. So let me ask you. Yeah, they got 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick. They have 4 picks in the top 58, I believe. Okay. You and I tend to agree that they're not making 3 first-round picks. They're going to maneuver a little bit. So how many picks do you think they're going to make in the top 60?
Well, I don't know what they have. I don't have the board in front of me. How many have passed the first
3
round?
first-round picks and then 58th overall. So 15, 16, 19, and 58, right?
I think they'll make 3 in the first 60.
And you don't think any of those? I see a cornerback, I see a defensive end or strong side linebacker. You don't think a coverage off ball linebacker will be in the?
No, I see. Well, again, remember, I know that what we were told is Gannon adjusted it, but as you remember, for most of the season, the linebackers are really far back. Yeah, Singleton struggled with it because it was completely different from the way he was aligned with Schwartz. Right. Then we were told there was some adjustment made. I don't know how many yards. Let's say they were 7 yards back from the ball. Maybe they were 5. I don't have that information right now. But when you really look at it, the history of this football team is they just don't invest in linebackers. They tried Matt McCoy?
Second round pick.
Total
2006, I believe.
Yeah.
No.
Total.
2005, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Total small line. Oh, God, I think we've mentioned him like 3 times in 5 years.
Yeah, we have.
It's just too small, and he was very fast, but he was a bust.
Right.
They just don't believe in it. And again, they haven't done a pure linebacker, a pure pure linebacker in the first round in 43 years.
Right.
Jerry Robinson.
No, I didn't think first round. I got a kick out of people reaching out to us on Twitter saying, well, do you think this Kyzir White signing means that they're not going to take Devin Lloyd in the first round? And I responded to a few saying, well, only if you actually really believe they were going to take Devin Lloyd in the first round.
Exactly.
You and I never believed that for a second. I don't believe for one hot second that the Eagles would take a linebacker in the first round.
If it did, I'm telling you, like easily 50% of Eagles Twitter would be so happy.
I might have a parade.
I know. There's so many people, as you know, you've been here for decades. They love Buddy Ryan. Guy never won a playoff game, but they loved him because of the defense,
right.
Because of how physical they were and how great they were. And fans are dying for it, but you might have to wait a little bit longer.
Yep. I've always said if the Eagles ever won the Super Bowl the way the Seahawks did with the Legion of Boom, there would be a statue built for all 11 starters on defense. Cam Chancellor gets a statue, Earl Thomas gets a statue. I forget, Richard Sherman, they all get statues because that's how much this town loves defense. But I'm with you. I don't think they're drafting a linebacker in the first round, not even for like a split second. Second round, I've entertained the idea of it though, but you don't think so. But I totally get why you don't think that.
Ordinarily, I don't think a guy on a 1 year deal like Kyzir White would matter. But I'm just going by history. It's just not the way that they think. They did it with Kendricks, and that one worked, by the way. He got a second contract. Yeah. He's helped them win a Super Bowl. Right. But that was several years ago. So, look, things could change, and we'll see. We'll see what they do. But that would definitely floor me if they did that. That would go against their philosophy. They just don't. But I would say this: if they were closer to being a really good playoff team, I do believe they can make a jump if they get a lot of these picks right. But let's just say, like, we evaluated the roster. And we felt like they're like 3 players away from being a bona fide Super Bowl contender, and linebacker was one of them. If that linebacker will rush the passer in addition to be a good tackler, that's a different story. It's a different story. But history shows differently.
So to close it off on Kyzir White, I would just urge people, people are going to do what they want, not to get wrapped up in the PFF gradings and the tackle metrics and things like that, because a lot of that is scheme. You play well when you're put in the scheme that suits your strengths, and also if you have good players around you. Again, Alex Singleton, I bet his metrics from 2 years ago in Jim Schwartz's defense, as far as missed tackles and things like that, are a lot better than they were last year. 2 years ago, Alex Singleton led the team in tackles. He was a starter. He was an ascending player. Last year, same guy. Year later, not old by any stretch of the means, benched. Okay, so that's why don't just take Kyzir White in the Chargers defense, put him in the Eagles defense and say he's this, that, and the other. And history has shown you, by the way, that this is a difficult proposition because the last 4 years, the Eagles have tried to sign a 1 year placeholder linebacker and it hasn't worked. It didn't work with Eric Wilson. Now, 2 years ago, they just got unlucky because Jatavis Brown resigned right before the season, retired. 3 years ago, it was Corey Nelson from the Broncos. He had a great year. People were like, oh, my God, it's great. Yeah. And Will Park's the same. Even though he was a safety, he had a good year with the Broncos. He came to the Eagles, got cut halfway through the year. So even though that's a different position, it's sort of the same concept. You got a 1 year placeholder coming from a different scheme. Doesn't mean he's going to be what he was there here. They've got to make it work, and that's up to the coaches to do it. So you have the right to remain skeptical on this signing based on the history of their 1 year placeholders for the last few years now.
I'll give you an example. Remember Cato June, who played for the Colts?
I do.
Undersized linebacker, was a safety at Michigan. He was tremendous in Tony Dungy's cover two. Mm-hmm. He put up a bleep load of tackles. He was like 215 to 217, believe it or not. Like he was listed way higher. I remember someone of the Colts then telling me, he goes, our media guide isn't correct. He's way less than that. Maybe he said 228. Mm-hmm. Way less than 228. They would know. He's in the teens. But You're right. Scheme produces tackles, man. I know from looking at these things for decades, man. If you're in a right scheme, you could have a ton of solo tackles and not be a great football player. But White's tape, we're told, is pretty good. Like he's a good football player.
I like him.
Size-wise, he doesn't meet what Brandon Staley wants.
Yeah, it's really not about the player to me. I don't think any of these guys that they signed were per se bad players, right? It's just that they were in a different scheme that may not have catered to their strengths. So that's part of your scouting and your coaching, to be honest. So hopefully they'll have figured it out this time around. All right. Make sure you're checking out our friends at phlsportsnation.com, enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. So make sure you're checking them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation. Let's pause real quick for a word from our great sponsors, including our friends at Sky Motor Cars. And if you head out there to Westchester, PA, and stop into Sky Motor Cars, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. Not a good deal, a great deal on an automobile. All right, we'll finish it off. We'll talk about a little bit about the offense and what the Eagles are doing here, because this has been a defensive-oriented podcast so far. Still looking to see, Adam, on wide receiver. As we've talked about, what are the plans here? What are they going to do? Are they looking for a big body X? Are they going to play a little bit more 12 personnel this year? You know, there's a nice crop of tight ends that are coming out. So what do you kind of get the feeling right now with this team?
Yeah,
Offensively?
this is a major question for their offense, because after the Ertz trade, one of the reasons why the Eagles wanted to move Ertz last spring, quite frankly, not only was he on the last year of his deal, they felt kind of pigeonholed in terms of doing. You had to do more 12. If you have Zach Ertz on your team, you're playing with Dallas Goedert, you have to play a lot of 12. Under Doug Peterson, the first 2 years, they were a spread West Coast, heavy 11 personnel. Once they drafted Goddard, we get it. You have to be 12. That's just with Zach Ertz is what you have to do to count for the players and the contracts. So they were playing more 11 personnel, do you think, with Ertz, actually, than they normally would. But it really became more heavy 11 personnel after the Ertz trade. So here's the question. Knowing that we know that they tried to make the trade for Calvin Ridley, in fact, the trade was basically done, but because the Falcons had to back off because of the gambling accusation, the investigation. And then, we're told pretty strongly that they made a very strong push and offer to try to sign Allen Robinson. So is this an indication to you, with Devontae Smith, with Quez Watkins, and I know the head coach calls him he could be the best, one of the best number 2 receivers he's ever coached, whatever he's been around. But the fact that they try to bring these other guys, that would mean Quez Watkins would be their third receiver. Does that mean they're going to be super heavy 11 personnel going forward? I would say yes.
I would say that's going to be dependent on the personnel. Are they able to get a receiver that gives them the confidence to be able to be 11 personnel? And I wonder if perception right now is hurting them a little bit as far as what they were last year compared to what they want to be offensively. Last year, they cut their teeth as a run-heavy, run-first team. I think that was pretty obvious. That was the key to their success after the first 7 games of the year, when they decided to completely rip up their offensive philosophy and start anew behind the running game. So you have to wonder if that's the philosophy they want to go forward with, because if they do, then they're probably going to want to get another young tight end who can block a little bit and maybe get into some more 12 personnel. And then if you do that, and if you express that, then maybe receivers look at you a little differently. For example, this is something that we had reported and then gave him a little more on Twitter this week. Richie James was a wide receiver for the 49ers. He was also a very good punt returner. We said the Eagles had shown interest in him. We came back from the combine hearing that, right? He signed with the Giants this past week. And as we're told, he was down to 2 teams, the Eagles and the Giants. And he chose the Giants. Why did he choose the Giants? Is it more of a playing time thing? Is it more because they're passing? Because you would think that there's good opportunity for a wide receiver to come in here and get targets, because really you only have 2 target monsters in Devontae and Dallas Goedert. Yeah. And if one guy gets hurt, then opens up the door.
Yeah,
the Giants actually have a lot of receivers. Adam,
they do.
So you would have thought that the Eagles would be more of an attractive destination. But if a wide receiver thinks that a team's, the Eagles are running the ball a lot and there won't be that many targets, then maybe that factored into his decision. I don't know.
Yeah, I could tell you this though. It was brought up to me at the combine by a couple agents when they look at Philly. They just thought they don't know Sirianni. They just mentioned how the offense is very run centric, which is not like them, as we know. All Eagle fans know that history is that they have that pass first philosophy, and they were through the first 5 weeks most passing attempts per game in the NFL, and then they led the NFL in rushing attempts after that, which is I don't know if that's ever been done before in the NFL, but Sirianni sure did it, and that wasn't lost on some of the agents we talked to at the combine. So that may have played into. I don't know what happened with Allen Robinson other than he got a great deal. It's obvious he chose to go with Matthew Stafford and to try to win the Super Bowl. And we don't know the exact numbers that the Eagles offered him, but we heard where they were very competitive. But it's obvious if I'm Allen Robinson, I'm going to the Rams over the Eagles. It's the Super Bowl,
Right.
And he had a chance as someone who's worked with him in the past told me. He's always wanted to work with a great quarterback, and here you go. So that one's obvious. Now, Calvin Ridley, we talked about why that happened, but we had heard at the combine, a couple agents mentioned who had players on offense. They not just receiver, whatever the case may be, that their players look at them as a heavy run offense. So the question is, now that the Eagles have clearly made this decision that they're going to add a significant piece of receiver because they already gave the answers to the test and try to get Ridley. And then when they didn't get Ridley, they tried for Allen Robinson.
Right.
And they did have some talks, though. They were not serious with Juju Smith's agent. They're already telling you what they're going to do to me. They're going to add another receiver of significance. Now, we don't know who that's going to be, whether it's a trade or it's a draft. So that's why I asked you. I would think they're going to
it's going to have to come via the draft. I mean, if they're having trouble getting veteran receivers, or if they can't even get Richie James to say, yeah, I'll come over, it feels like they have to go and draft a guy and have him, which is probably the better route to go anyway. But especially given what's left out there in free agency, I don't know. I know there's going to be 3 names that people are going to hone in on right now because of their contract situation. Right, AJ Brown has not yet gotten an extension. Yeah. I don't think from the Titans. I don't know why they haven't, but he hasn't. He's a good player. Who are the other 2? I'm just drawing a blank all of a sudden. There's 2 other receivers.
Metcalf. The Seahawks. There's some very bad internet rumors out there. There's just very bad speculation. They kind of laughed. Pete Carroll, I listened to his interview last week. He clearly wants to get this done. Now, if I'm DK Metcalf, okay, it's bad enough that Pete Carroll micromanages the offense, and now he's eligible to get an extension. He's played now 3 years. No offense to Drew Lock. I know he's a strong arm. The Broncos made decisions. He's not good enough. If you ever watch him, he's got bad mechanics. They need a quarterback who could get him the football. He's not indicated that he wants to be traded or anything like that. But man, I'd love to see him with a great quarterback. He is. I understand there's some things he doesn't do. He doesn't throttle down very well. You got to keep him going forward.
Yeah,
man, he's a gifted player.
Oh, I'll take him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, man, any team would take him. No, the neck thing has not been a problem. I know that it wasn't just the Eagles. There were some teams that gave him a low medical grade because of his neck.
Right.
But he's been fine so far, and he enters year 4, and he doesn't have a new deal. The Seahawks have told him they want to extend his contract, and the Titans are usually pretty aggressive. He too has now played 3 games, so played 3 years, so he's eligible for extension. And they don't have anybody. They cannot trade him. They don't have anybody. Robert Woods is okay. He's somebody. He's coming after a torn ACL. They don't have anyone behind him. In fact, things got so bad. Remember Marcus Johnson?
Yes.
He was playing a ton of snaps, and then he suffered a significant injury. So they ran out of players, and Julio Jones, basically, they didn't want him.
Right. So wasn't there one more wide receiver in the same group as Metcalf and Brown who is 3 years in but has not been extended yet?
Cortland Sutton got his. He was 18, though.
Yeah, he got his. Man, Debo
was Debo 19 or 20?
No, Debo. That is the one.
Yeah, Debo. Yeah. He is, and remember, just like DK Metcalf, he has no 5th-year option, and AJ Brown. They're all set. Wow, what a second round! My goodness gracious.
Yeah,
these might be Hall of Famers.
I know. Eagles took a wide receiver in the 2nd round that year, but it just
Oops.
Oh well. Okay.
They tried to trade out.
Anyway, so that's. I think we're in agreement that the offense is sort of up in the air right now. And I think we have to react to the moves that they make before we get a better idea on what they can do offensively from an identity standpoint. They don't get themselves a wide receiver in either the first or second round, and they don't trade for a guy, and they kind of run it back with what they've got.
It won't. That won't happen. There's because if you really look at it, right now, again, the head coach could say that Quez Watkins could be like one of the best number twos he's ever been around or coached.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one thing to say it. What does Sal Powell says? It's not what they say. Look at what they do. Right. Look what they try to do. The fact that they try to trade for Ridley and then, because that didn't work out, they try to sign Allen Robinson, tells you. Because Watkins, they don't see him as that. So it's the answers are out there. They're clearly going to do something. That's why when you thought I was surprised, you said you were surprised at what I said in the last show, but they absolutely would spend one of their 3 first rounders that they kept on receiver. Well, it's not just me saying it. They're telling you what they're going to do. They tried to do something significant. It didn't work. They're not done. They're done.
Has there ever been, I guess the Detroit Lions once did this, right? 3 straight years of taking a wide receiver in the first round.
Yeah. Matt, I never asked Matt Millen that. I used to watch tape with him in NFL films. Was it Calvin Johnson, obviously a Hall of Famer. Roy Williams, and who was the other one?
Charles Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
Michigan State. Hey, he was a hell of a college player. He
was. And he kept getting hurt. Yeah.
Didn't he also have a PED suspension, I think?
Yeah, he had some issues. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Did not work out for them. Well, the third time was the charm for them with Calvin Johnson. So
oh my God, unbelievable! And to this day, they still don't. No one knows why Joey Harrington was taken. By the way, to this day, it's supposed to be Quentin Jammer.
You're supposed to be. Yes, that's true. All right, that's gonna do it. I think we've pretty much wrapped it all up on this, and we'll hopefully have some more really good, tantalizing stuff to talk about when our next pod drops Thursday morning. So that's gonna do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. His channel is called Sports Talk with Broads. His website is broadsmedia.com. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.